The Raptors have one of their most embarrassing losses of the season to the Sacramento Kings. Let's go to the film room.
The only thing that's originally filmed is that Scottie. And I've studied older films and tried to figure out how I got that impression. I was getting meetings right in the cutting room.
The unique thing about film is an art form
exactly.
is the editing.
All right, folks, this was a deplorable performance from the Toronto Raptors, who lost to one of the worst teams in the NBA and to two former Toronto Raptors in Precious Achiuwa and DeMar DeRozan. A lack of effort from top down. It was basically a wire-to-wire victory for a team that has 20 wins on the season compared to the Raptors, who are, in the playoff hunt. They now fall to 7th in the Eastern Conference, and they did that because they lost a game to the Sacramento Kings. How did they lose a game to the Sacramento Kings, you ask? The possession battle. Precious Achiuwa had 11 offensive rebounds in this game. He had 19 total rebounds, and why that is important is because the Raptors ended up taking 15 fewer shots than the Sacramento Kings. The Kings had 92 shot attempts. The Raptors had just 77 in this game. They got completely out-rebounded by 16 rebounds. And the big difference here, as you can see on possessions like this, is just a lack of effort. Like, look at this. As DeMar DeRozan gets his shot up, nobody puts a body on Precious Achiuwa. The corner crash is happening. Jamal Shed has to focus on Devin Carter crashing, and it's just no effort. So there's two bodies going to the floor, two bodies going up, and Jakob and RJ are nowhere to be found on the offensive glass. A lot of driving opportunities for the Kings in this game, and because the Raptors had to sell out to help on these drives, so you see here RJ Barrett helping on this DeMar DeRozan drive, creates the opportunity for Precious Achiuwa to get over his back and just get this easy. Now DeMar DeRozan early on in the and that, folks, is why the Raptors absolutely got decimated. It was such an ugly performance from an effort perspective from a team that, for the most part, I thought against the Detroit Pistons had that level of effort. It's just that they were out-executed by a better basketball team. Tonight, they were out-executed, and I guess executed by a worse basketball team, a severely worse basketball team. Precious Achiuwa is out here fighting for his NBA career. He's had a really great season for the Sacramento Kings. But the combination of him and DeMar DeRozan were the reason that the Raptors lost this game. DeMar DeRozan poured in what I believe he had 2 points in the first half. He had 26 points in the second half. He was unconscious in terms of scoring the ball. The Raptors had no one that was able to stop him. A lot of lackadaisical fouls in that regard, too. DeMar got to the free throw line 12 times. And again, Precious Achiuwa, one of his best games of the season, in a season that he's had a good year, but 28 points, 19 rebounds on 19 shots, and including those 11 offensive rebounds that I detailed to you guys. Those offensive rebounds set back the Raptors in a major way when it comes to the possession battle. Because if you look at, the Raptors' overall offensive efficiency in this game, it wasn't terrible. They did miss some free throws. They were 22 of 32 from the free throw line. And so missing a few free throws here and there really limited them. They only shot 70% from the free throw line. But, in terms of their three-point percentage, they were 40% from the three-point line, 54% from the field. They only took 23 threes, and three-point volume has clearly become an issue for them all season. But offensive efficiency, not the worst night, considering the fact that you were missing Brandon Ingram and Emmanuel Quickley, two guys who are obviously very vital to the function of your offense, to the variety of your offense, as we've talked about all season. This was a terrible effort. And to think of the fact that the Raptors got out-rebounded in a game where they had their entire front court, where Jakob Poeltl was available, where Colin Murray-Boyles was available, where Sandro Mamukelashvili was available. Of course, Trace Jackson-Davis didn't play in this game, but that does not make it that you could get out-bodied like this by the Sacramento Kings. It's a deplorable performance. It was genuinely one of the worst performances I could argue the worst performance of the season from a team that is 7 games away from potentially playing in a playoff series. That is how bad it is. And it's funny because this whole month has been so on and off, hot and cold. You go through a stretch at the start of March, and I'll just pull up their schedule just for referential sake. They go through a stretch at the start of March, end of February, where they lose to the Thunder, they lose to the Spurs, they lose to the Knicks, they lose to the Timberwolves, and you're like, and they lose to the Rockets, and you're like, man, this team just cannot beat good teams. And the Pelicans game happens, and that's another punch in the mouth, literally, with the DeJounte Murray situation. And it feels like the Raptors had hit rock bottom at that point. They bounce back with 3 massive wins, including 2 big games against the Suns and the Pistons, where you're like, okay, this team can respond to a level of adversity. Big win, awesome. They go on that West Coast road trip and they fight valiantly against the Nuggets in a performance where you're like, wow, this team, when they're all collected and locked in, they can reach a level that is competing against a defending, or not a defending champion, but a championship contender. But then it falls off the rails again. And injuries obviously played a factor here. Brandon Ingram started to be ailed with some injuries. Emmanuel quickly started to be ailed with some injuries. This is when Scottie Barnes took over the helm of things in terms of being the lead playmaker because the Raptors were dealing with injuries. But they get blown out by the Suns. They squeak out a win against the Jazz. And actually, they don't squeak it out. That was a very clean win from the Raptors against the Jazz. The Raptors shot the lights out in that game. Very ugly loss to the Clippers. They beat the Pelicans, an undermanned Pelicans team. They destroy the Magic in what was an awesome game and a momentous game, right? A game when you're like, okay, they're back again, responding to that adversity. They're figuring things out. They're injured, but they're still battling, and it's all good and it's all gravy. One of the best performances of the season. They follow that up against the Pistons, and you say, they're undermanned. It's okay. That makes sense. The team isn't fully healthy, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't have the shooting ability. I thought shooting was a big factor in that game, shot making and ball handling against the Pistons. And I'm sorry for not being available for a recap for that. I was at the 905 game, watching the 905, unfortunately, end their season against the G League affiliate of the Pistons. So I didn't have a chance to fully contextualize the game until this morning when I rewatched it. But shooting and ball handling was the big difference in that game. And so it was a weird March. And you start April with a weird loss to the Sacramento Kings. What did you learn post All-Star break from this Raptors team? That they're probably not good enough. Yeah, that's probably one aspect of things. That the roster function is a house of cards, and when one of those things is missing, when one of those players is missing, or 2 of those players are missing, everything can collapse, and there is no true foundation on which the Raptors are working on. That's probably the second thing you can think of. The third thing I would bring up is that I think they've discovered that there is a higher ceiling to which they can reach. Like the goods are there for them to try and get to something else. Maybe not this season, but eventually. But that will require a level of roster construction. And this entire season for the Raptors, I'm gonna get to a Scottie Barnes thing in a second, but this entire season for the Raptors, from the moment they started, has been about data retention, about assessing what this team has. And what I mean by that is that they are gaining as much information, they are gaining as much data as possible to see who should stick around, who should stay, and who should go, and who needs to be replaced in order for this team to reach that next level. Because to them, as wild as it might sound, this is year one of a rebuild for them. Sure, you can say last year was year one of a rebuild, but to them, this is year one of a rebuild. This is year one of their test run. And yeah, of course, they're battling in an Eastern Conference, and for the most part, they've done a good job of beating up on bad teams. They did not do that tonight, as I mentioned. But you are heading into an all-important offseason where you do not have the leeway of a young team. As much as you could argue that this team is young and inexperienced, which I would say, yeah, that's true with Scottie Barnes at the helm and some of their bench players not being as experienced, even though RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, and Brandon Ingram and Jakob Poeltl, all of those guys to some extent have a level of playoff experience. I would agree with you that they're an inexperienced and young team, especially off of their bench. But you do not have the luxury of an inexperienced and young team salary wise. And so heading into this summer, you have to make quick decisions. You have to make smart decisions. And how much are you going to use the data that you gained from this season to make those decisions? That's the big question because clearly this is a team that like is good but not good enough. And I think you have some tangible positives to take away from this season. Mainly, I think you have reaffirmed your belief in Scottie Barnes as a guy to build around. Of course, he's a player who is not perfect, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But of course, he is a defensive player of the year caliber player. He's shown that to us this season. He's an all defense level player. He's shown that to us this season. He is a player that impacts winning at a massive scale for this Toronto Raptors team. The Raptors are much better on the floor when he's on the floor. That's unequivocally true. You have proven to yourself that Brandon Ingram and his scoring, or at least having a scorer next to Scottie Barnes, is essential. And truthfully, I think you've established that you need multiple scorers around Scottie Barnes, whether that is Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly. Like, you need multiple guys that can score the ball next to Scottie because Scottie is a great playmaker. He can make passes. And if he gets the right amount of spacing and the right amount of shooting, and truthfully, the right amount of playmaking around him, maybe his scoring can develop and get better too. So you found a couple of different things here. You've also found out that Colin Murray-Boyles is a guy. And folks, he was their best player tonight. Colin Murray-Boyles poured in 20 points. It was on 9 shots. He had 4 rebounds. He had a couple of good defensive possessions as well. He ended up with 5 fouls, but for the most part, I thought CMB was far and away the Raptors' best player today. And so CMB is another guy that you found. That's a guy that you can build around, rotation player, a guy who maybe has the makings of eventually being an all-star in this league. Maybe, right? Who knows? He still has to work on a lot of different things. Again, he is not perfect either, but you have found certain things that you can take away from positives. And I'm not going to get into all the negatives, even though I kind of just did. But there's a very clear path forward for this team, even though the actual answers aren't there in terms of who they have to go out and get. The path forward is that they must make changes to their roster this summer. What those changes are, which players to acquire, that comes down to the data that they've retained from this season. And, for my opinion, I've mentioned it a million times on this show, but I think that they absolutely require another ball handler, more shooting, and more creation. That is my main thing with this Raptors team. They need better shot creation. They need more scoring. They need more three-point shooting. Where they find that from, what position they find that from, what type of player they find, I think that's an open-ended question. But boy, do they need that. So we'll see what the Raptors do. There is a level of flexibility that they have to. We can get into offseason talk later because the Raptors still have a playoff series that they potentially have to play. And oh, by the way, that playoff series is in jeopardy now. I kind of wanted to get into this, but maybe we'll do it now. Of course, the Raptors are playing the Grizzlies. They play the Celtics, and then they play the Heat twice, as well as they play the Knicks and the Nets. Okay? The Hawks have 2 games in hand over the Raptors. Even though the Raptors have the tiebreaker against the Hawks have played more games already. So the Hawks only have 5 games remaining on their schedule. Meanwhile, the Raptors have 7 games remaining on their schedule. Of course, the Hawks' schedule is harder. They play the Nets, but then they follow that up by playing the Knicks, the Cavaliers twice, and the Miami Heat. So in terms of who they might beat in that category, it remains to be seen. But of course, a harder schedule for the Atlanta Hawks. It's something that the Raptors can capitalize on, but they do need to take care of business. And clearly, as they showed tonight, They lack an ability to take care of business in the moments that it matters most. And then if you look at the Philadelphia 76ers, who are also in this race for the 5-6, they have the tiebreaker over the Toronto Raptors. I'm just trying to pull up their schedule here for you guys so I can be coherent. They're currently tied with the Raptors in terms of standing, but they also have a tough schedule. They play the Minnesota Timberwolves, they play the Detroit Pistons, they play the San Antonio Spurs, and the Houston Rockets, and then they finish out the season by playing the Indiana Pacers and the Milwaukee Bucks. So it feels like Philly is going to go 2-4 in that group. Maybe they end up winning a game. I think they'll probably end up going like 3-3 in that stretch. The Hawks, from that perspective, even though they have a couple of games in hand, it feels like they might go 1-4, maybe 2-3 in that final stretch. And so if you're looking at the Raptors in their final 6 games, they need to go 4-2 or better. They can't do anything worse than that. 3-3 means they would be tied with Philly, which means they would be out of the play-in. They need to be 4-2 and better. And so Memphis is a win. Let's just chalk it up as a win right now because I'm not trying to deal with a reality in which the Raptors will lose to the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's talk about the Memphis Grizzlies is a win. The Brooklyn Nets is a win. And then you have to win 2 of the games between the Boston Celtics, Miami Heat twice, and the New York Knicks. So that's the season for the Raptors. Or they are faced with the possibility of playing a play-in game versus their nemesis this season, the Charlotte Hornets, a team that they have struggled to beat a lot this season, as you guys probably remember from all of the moments in which they have struggled to beat the Charlotte Hornets. Okay, I want to talk about Scottie Barnes because for the last week we've talked about Scottie and his ability to be this incredible playmaker for the Toronto Raptors, and he continues to be an incredible playmaker for the Toronto Raptors. He had 10 assists tonight. Those assists were very essential to getting whatever level of playmaking and scoring that the Raptors were able to have in this game. Again, the possession battle really limited them, but it's the scoring from him that will always be the difference maker between an incredible Scottie Barnes game and a game in which he just does sort of the bare minimum. And I thought Scottie struggled in this game as a scorer. He kind of bailed out the defense in a lot of situations. And truthfully, that's the big drawback with Scottie sometimes as a scorer. Sometimes in certain matchups, he can be so aggressive. He can get downhill. We saw that against the Orlando Magic. Sometimes the three-point shot is falling where he can knock down a pull-up 3 or 2 to engage the defense in a way in pick-and-roll coverages that makes them look at things a little bit differently. Tonight, the Sacramento Kings were basically daring him to shoot, whether it was going under on screens, whether it was backing up and spacing the floor for him. And Scottie wasn't able to capitalize. He was 5 of 14 in this game from the field. And I don't say this to diminish what Scottie Barnes is as a player. It's just the truth that his scoring isn't his main attribute. And so when we talk about him being the main ball handler or the lead ball handler for a team and point Scottie, et cetera, this is the limitation of that. So as you see here, pick and roll coverage, they basically go under on this, daring him to shoot this ball. And as you see, the spacing is all off as well because obviously Jakob Poeltl is trying to post up here, and he settles into a mid-range jump shot. Similar situation, not a pick and roll here, but isolation. But watches Caldwell, I believe it is, just completely backs down. He's not respecting that jumper whatsoever. And so he backs down. This time, again, they go under on the screen, and he gets the switch on Reynaud. And once again, kind of bails out the defense here. I would love for him to be more aggressive. Scottie just ended up taking 8 free throws in this game, knocked down only 4 of them. That's another issue. But be more aggressive instead of going for these mid-range jump shots. He knocked down that one. And again, so you see here, they go under on the screen. He gets the switch on Devin Carter, tries to go one-on-one, isn't able to, he doesn't have the wiggle to be able to explode or create past Devin Carter. So he just gets stonewalled, and he usually ends up stopping in this area of the floor. And we've seen Scottie knock down these shots before, but it's tough offense. Like that's difficult offense to live and die by. And so that's the struggle of Scottie Barnes being your primary scorer, primary creator on any given night. That's why Brandon Ingram is important. That's why Emmanuel Quickley is important. And boy, do the Raptors miss Emmanuel Quickley's three-point shooting, his secondary ball handling right now. Again, the Raptors are a house of cards. Every single, I kind of made this comp a few weeks ago about all of the Raptors starters being X-Men and all of them providing a specific function to this team, like your heart does pump blood through your body, like your brain allows you to send waves to the rest of your body, send whatever. I'm not a scientist, so excuse me for this terrible comp, but your brain allows you to send signals to the rest of your body to function, like your eyes allow you to see, like your mouth allows you to chew, and your teeth allow you to chew and eat your food. Like all of these things provide a function for you to live. And the Raptors, their players, especially their star players, all have a specific function that allows for their team to live. When you pluck one of those guys out, everything else falls apart. Everything else falls apart. And that's a roster construction thing, but it's also just what the Raptors are at this point in the season. 70 games into the year, this is who they are. I'm going long-winded. I apologize because I felt like there was actually a lot to get into today in terms of just how disappointing of a game it was from the Toronto Raptors. We will see what happens. Of course, there's 6-7 games left in the regular season, and I'm very curious to see how the Raptors close this out. Another adversity type moment for them here as they lose to the Sacramento Kings. Folks, as always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do the things that you guys do to make sure Raptors Republic gets out to other people. We appreciate you as always, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.